So, on today's episode, we're talking to a guest who recently completed a super challenging ski expedition across a section of Baffin Island in the Canadian Arctic. And she was also with Ray Zahab. I think I may have pronounced that a little bit wrong, but we'll clean it up later. But she's here to share her experience with us. And so, kind of through her adventures and stuff, she hopes to really inspire others to push their limits and to accomplish what they once thought was impossible, while also encouraging more women to pursue outdoor activities. So, welcome to the podcast, Valarie Gagne.
Thank you.
Hey.
Great to be here.
Yeah, you bet. So, and I was just talking to her before this, and I was like, thanks so much. Valerie reached out to me on email, and she knows that I have a soft spot for people doing really incredible things. And so she was saying, hey, let's talk about maybe some Arctic stuff. And I'm like, let's do it, right?
Yeah.
So really, my first question to pop this whole podcast off is, number one, why the Arctic?
Okay, so I like to do really extreme things and to explore and go to places in their most real nature. And so going to the Arctic in February, where it's the coldest and there's not a lot of daylight, that's just the realest way of experiencing a place. Kind of like the opposite for deserts. Deserts, you have to go in the summer, in the heat of the summer. So, and it's just kind of experiencing the environment in its truest form, I guess.
I love it. So you are really someone that seeks the challenge.
Yes, absolutely.
Not only just a challenge, but you want to have the maximum amount of challenge that you can. You want to squeeze all the challenge out of that. I totally love that.
Yeah.
It's funny because as you say that, I kind of get taken back to when I was younger, and I remember I would always play just random games with my parents or something, playing catch, right? With a football. And I always tell my dad, I was like, I want it to be the most challenging throw, so I can try to I want it to be challenging. I want you to throw challenging throws to me so I can try to catch them or whatever. Do you ever remember back when you were younger, I guess, that any kind of proclivity or just kind of urging to really love challenging things? When was your first kind of memory of that, I guess?
I couldn't really pinpoint it to an exact time or event, but definitely when I was younger, I had to do everything to its fullest. So I always wanted to be the fastest, the strongest. I always wanted to be the first. And as I'm saying this, I'm thinking about one moment actually where I was in the third grade, just changed to a new school, and they were running the cross-country event in the fall, right? So just a 1.5K or 2K, I can't remember. But only the fourth graders could compete, and fourth, fifth, and sixth graders had access to that competition. And I remember saying to my mom, I want to run the race. This is cool. I love running. I want to be in that race. And so she said, no, it's already, only fourth graders. So next year you can. And I'm like, no, I want to go this year.
Yeah.
And so we went to see the school principal, and I asked if I could go and join the race. And then he said, well, he kind of looked at my mom she's crazy a little bit, what, just wait till next year. But then they kind of made a deal that if I trained for it, then I could run it. And so every morning my mom would drive me and my sisters to school, and we had about a 500-meter private road that we were on, a gravel road, not a lot of traffic. So every morning and every night coming back from school, I'd run that 500-meter section in my uniform school skirt. So I guess that from that point, just I had to do everything kind of a competitive spirit And yeah.
I love it. So as you were kind of thinking about, or as I kind of asked the question, you were one kind of like subconsciously came into your mind, really.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess
So,
that would be like a good example of how I was a little bit extreme, just wanted to push myself always.
yeah. And
That's
then
always
kind of,
been a part of it. Yeah.
yeah. And then kind of from there, it obviously it progressed
Yes.
to other things, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome.
So progressed to, well, in sports, and I did a few sports at a high level, and then retired from high performance sports, but I kind of had to still keep that challenge aspect in my life. I knew that like the 30-minute a day being active physical activity that they recommend was like not going to cut it for me. Like it's just, if I don't have a goal, I'm not going to work out for anything. Like I'm just going to be like a couch potato, and I'm going to put on like 100 pounds, and I'm just going
Yeah.
to like die in my sofa, you know? But yeah, so when I retired from high performance sports, I thought, okay, what's next? And what other challenges can I get myself into? And then wonderful world of ultra running and ultra marathons came up, and it's actually where I met Ray.
Right.
I signed up for a nonprofit organization. They bring kids on expeditions. It's called Impossible to Possible, and I signed up for one of their expeditions, and I got selected for it, and we went and ran on average a marathon a day for 7 consecutive days in the Atacama Desert.
Oh, really? Interesting.
Yeah, so then I got into that whole world, and then that kind of spiraled into more of like the adventurous stuff and more adventurous and expedition style.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love it. Okay. I love it. Talked about basically, one thing led to another. You met Ray, you started getting into ultra marathoning. And eventually, I'm guessing that kind of led to your latest adventure then, which would be on Baffin Island in the Arctic, correct? So tell me a little bit about that adventure. Like, and specifically what I'd really love to know about it is, well, just kind of set us up, like what was the goal, right?
Okay.
And I'd love to know, what are some of like the biggest challenges you faced on that adventure?
Okay, so first of all, I was invited on this expedition by my friend Ray. He had planned a much longer expedition, going from one community in the Arctic to the next, all on skis and trekking. And then he got diagnosed with cancer in the fall. I think it was in September. And so his plans for this expedition changed a little bit, and he was going to shorten it up to make it work with his chemo schedule. So then he invited me to come with him on the expedition, and he knew that because it would only be about 7 days, it would work with my schedule. And also I'm not at the same level of fitness and absolute crazy extreme adventures that Ray is at, so I could probably handle this type of expedition. And so we set out, we went from one community to the other, but we kind of shortened the trip by using snow machines to get us on the sea ice up through the fjord, and then we started on the land. And so we did the land part on skis and trekking, because in the Arctic in the winter, there's not that much snow, and some of the spots are kind of windswept. And so it was kind of a mix of skiing and trekking. And so at the end of the land, once we crossed over, then we got picked up again by the snow machines and rode back into the community at the end. So it was a total of 7 days. And actually, one of the most challenging parts of the expedition was the snow machine ride. It would have been probably a lot easier, longer, but easier to just skip the snow machine rides and just ski the whole thing. just because the Inuit traditional way of traveling on the land is by snow machine. And they have like this, it's called a hamotik. It's a big wooden box in the back of the snow machine, and it's basically used to carry some gear. And we sat in those wooden boxes for about 12 hours, and we just got pounded by the like constant impact on the ice. And so just felt like every bone in my body would break, and couldn't catch a break because it was just like every 3 to 5 seconds, like bam, bam onto the ice. It was just, there's like no padding or anything in the bottom of those boxes. There's no suspension. It's awful. You feel like you're in a boxing ring getting like beaten up by a boxer. Really, like I thought that one of my ribs was broken, and like I thought I needed a double hip replacement. It's bad. It's awful, but it is a real part of Arctic expeditions. Like to get anywhere in the Arctic, that's how you travel. And so you have to be prepared for that. Like you have to know that it's coming. And there's just no way around it, because you're not going to like, you can't get a helicopter to just drop you off anywhere.
Right.
Like that's how you travel. So that was definitely one of the most challenging parts, even though it's not the actual expedition.
Physical thing. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. And then something else was definitely, well, like obviously the cold. I knew that it was going to be cold. I lived in Kuujjuaq, which is in the northern part of Quebec, kind of subarctic, so still very cold. I lived there for a year, and I knew what to expect, but it was kind of like it was one step more than what I had anticipated. So we had really accurate thermometers to collect weather data, kind of in an effort to support climate change research. And so that thermometer recorded minus 50 degrees Celsius. We had winds of 100 kilometers an hour at a certain point. And the worst part of it all is the humidity. It's really high humidity. It was 65%.
Wow.
So you think like, oh, it's going to be dry, but it's actually really not. So that humidity mixed in with that cold, with that temperature, and the wind chill just makes it like really hard to understand if you don't experience it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. And one thing I know of like just winter stuff in general, like winter backpacking, like which obviously isn't as extreme as that, but I just know that like compared to summer camping or backpacking or whatever, everything takes like 3 times as long.
Yes. It
You
really
know?
does.
Yeah, right? Like
Yeah.
what did you notice on your expedition that just was like, oh, this is taking forever, or anything that was really monotonous, or just
Well,
seemed
like
like it took extra time.
the obvious thing for us was that one of the days we couldn't travel because of the high winds. The risk of frostbite was just too high. And also, so when you're taking down your tent in the morning and going off for the day and skiing, and then like your tent is your safe space,
Right.
and you have to know that you're going to be able to put it up at the end of the day. And with those high winds, we weren't 100% sure that we would be able to set it up at the end of the day. So it was a question of frostbite, but also just being able to set up our shelter once we had finished our kilometers for the day. So we made the decision to just stay there for the whole day. So we spent 40 hours in the tent. Not doing anything, just like looking at the tent walls flapping in the wind. And
Now,
it was long.
how so? And I assume you are, I mean, you're just like how I am likely, which is you have to be well, you said it
Yeah.
yourself earlier. 30 minutes a day isn't enough for you. So
Yeah.
now you're grounded in a tent for 40 hours and you can't hardly go outside. So
Yeah.
what was that like, and what was your mental state like? What'd you do to keep busy?
Okay. So basically, you kind of shut off your brain,
Mm,
in the sense of you cannot think like, oh my God, we're here, we're stuck here. We don't know how long it's going to be. We don't know if even tomorrow we'll be able to travel or anything like that. So you kind of have to just shut off your brain and not think about anything. You can't think about like, oh, I wish I was back home. I wish I was nice and cozy in my living room in a blanket. Like I wish I was warm. That just cannot happen, or you're going to break mentally, right? And so you're really just focusing on the little tasks that you have to do, which are just boiling water and making tea and coffee and soup and yeah, just eating and drinking coffee all day. And then we were three. Luckily, we had, I had company and we could talk to each other. But at a certain point, there's really not much that you can talk about anymore. So we would invent stories and invent, characters and just kind of like go off in
wow.
that extra weird world that we invented.
Yeah.
But there were really long times, like long periods of times where we just didn't talk and we were all in our sleeping bags lying there fully awake. No one was sleeping. Even in the middle of the night, no one was sleeping because it was just too cold.
Yeah.
But you know that there's people next to you, but you also feel very isolated and
Yeah.
you also feel very alone in that moment because you're going through your own stuff, but there's a part of you that doesn't want to share and burden your teammates with
Mm,
that, with
mm,
what you're going through,
mm.
so it can be a little bit lonely and intense kind of with your own thoughts, and you have to be the kind of person that is okay with being in silence and being left alone with your own
Yeah.
thoughts. And yeah.
Yeah, super knowledgeable. I love that. That's some good wisdom there. Because if you get going down a bad path, it's tough to bring yourself out of that.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you know that the other people that you're with are also going through their own stuff. And as much as they can be there to help you out, um, everyone is just like holding on by a thread. And so it's kind of like, I cannot break down mentally. I cannot let myself just start to um,
Mm,
cry and like go into that really bad mental state because I don't know how my partners are doing. Like I know that they're way stronger than I am mentally, physically, and all that, but I just couldn't necessarily share it with them because I didn't want to burden them.
yeah. So what was it that how did you prevent yourself from going down that that rabbit
Um,
hole?
well, basically, just kind of like I said, like focusing on the little things that we had to do. Like we really didn't have to do it much, but kind of
Mm,
just getting some ice and melting it down and boiling water, and like those things take a lot of time. Like to boil a kettle takes like almost an hour just because it's so cold, and so it takes a lot of time, and so you just basically just looking at that kettle and willing the water to start boiling because you really want that coffee in the morning. But
right.
yeah, so that takes out like a good chunk of the day.
Yeah.
And then other things is just okay, well, now I have to go to the bathroom and kind
Yeah.
of biking yourself up and being like,
Right.
I'm gonna have to go now. Like, and maybe I can put it off for like half an hour, but yeah, it's coming. Like I have to get up and get dressed and brave those winds and get out there and go do
Yeah.
my stuff. So yeah.
I was gonna say that you guys had to have brought a massive amount of gear.
Yeah, we had a lot of gear, but also we were kind of traveling light in the sense that you cannot bring like an extra bathroom tent, and you can't bring, because we're only 3 people with 3 small sleds, and we're pulling all of our gear through that really technical, challenging land. So we can't be too heavy either,
Yeah.
Yeah. So a lot of gear, but kind of only the bare minimum as well.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Which, yeah, I would imagine that would freak me out in the Arctic when rescue would be so far away. It's freaking cold.
Yeah.
And if you forget something or if something breaks, you like, at least I guess you got like 2 other people that hopefully maybe would have like kind of a backup thing for that, right?
Mhm.
But it's like, gosh, I mean, one thing, I don't know, you lose your lighter, you lose whatever's the thing
Yeah.
that's boiling your water doesn't work anymore. It's like, now you're screwed.
Yeah, well, we had like a lot of those really essential things. We had like in double and triple, like we had 2 stoves, we had 3 pumps for the stoves. We
Yeah.
had a ton of extra fuel as well, just because we knew that being stuck in a tent for that really long period of time was a possibility, because
Yeah.
high winds in the Arctic are like they happen all the time. And we had planned that extra day to in our schedule for anything like that to happen, and it did happen.
Yeah.
So yeah, and
really?
we had a pump that kind of froze up, and we were never able to make it go again. So yeah, those things happen, but that's it. You bring extra stuff, and eventually like like our sleeping system, our sleeping bags, and all the clothes that we were wearing, that in the Arctic with that 65% humidity, everything's going to get wet eventually. But we also knew that we were only out there for 7 days. And it seems like a really long time, but at the same time, like 7 days, that you can get through it. Like it's not that long. We're not going out for like a month or 2 months type of expedition. Like it's 7 days. You can sleep in your damp sleeping bag for 7 days. It's going to be cold. You're not going to sleep a lot, but you'll be okay.
I love it. I love that mentality. Now, how many miles was it again, or what was the mileage or kilometers or?
Yeah, it was about 150 kilometers, so like just under 100 miles total.
Wow, so that's on skis too.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Wow. In like really difficult environment, difficult conditions, but yeah.
And I mean, did you use sleds then and things like that?
Yeah, so we had sleds with all of our equipment and gear in it, and skis, and then sometimes we just had to switch over and put our spikes on, and we just were on foot.
Right on.
Yeah.
Right on. Well, so how did you feel at the end of the whole thing? Were you wanting more, or were you like kind of like, I'm good?
So this is like, and I'm sure a lot of people know this feeling of like, you stop and you're like, I'm done. I don't want to do this again. Like this is not worth it. It is too much. It's too hard. Nobody needs to be that cold for that long. And so you think, okay, I did it. I'm happy I did it, but it's not happening again. And then you sleep on it, and then the next day you're like, that was fun, kind of, in this weird type 2 kind of way, And then another day goes by, and then it's kind of like your brain forgets, right? And it's you just forget the hard parts, but you remember that really awesome feeling of being out there, being connected with yourself, with the environment, and just being able to experience that, which is like a really big privilege. I know not a lot of people get to go out to the Arctic and do these things, but yeah, you kind of look back on it and think, maybe I could do something like this, similar. Not necessarily the exact same thing. I wouldn't spend 40 hours stuck in the tent in those conditions again if I didn't have to. But yeah, I think the brain kind of has this really interesting way of protecting itself from really stressful situations, and then it kind of forgets. And then you sign up for something like this again, and you put yourself in that situation all over again.
Isn't that interesting? So you
Yeah,
basically like, yeah, in the moment, I kind of feel like, screw this. I don't want to do this again. I'm super
yeah,
stoked for it to be over. And then you're basically saying a couple days later, 1 day later, 2 days later, it slowly starts creeping into your head that maybe I'll do something like this again.
yeah. Well, and I think this may be a little bit from experience too, because I've gone through that thought process a
Yeah.
few times before, just after a big race or whatever.
Yeah.
And I know that I will eventually say, okay, it's time to go on my next adventure. I'm not ready yet to say, like, okay, let's go back to the Arctic, or let's go back to and do something really intense, because I'm still like recovering mentally, I guess, from that experience. But I know that it's going to happen where I just something really interesting pops up into my own head, or someone like suggests, like, hey, let's go do this, and I'll be like, okay, let's go, sign me
Yeah.
up, let's do it.
Yeah.
So
What do you have in mind for the future? What I guess this, well, when was the Arctic?
in February.
In February. Okay, yeah. So
Yeah,
it was just a couple months ago.
yeah.
So yeah, what are your next challenges, I guess, or goals that you have for this year? What are you
um
looking at?
so I'm not sure yet,
Yeah,
and mostly there's one thing is like, yeah, I'm still recovering mentally from that
yeah,
uh adventure, and I want to do like I do small backyard adventures just here and there on weekends. But
mhm,
as far as like another big expedition, I haven't decided yet. There's also the fact that don't I don't know what I'm not sure what else is there that like is really meaningful for me.
yeah,
I want to do something that like I really believe in, because if
mhm,
someone just like suggests something that I'm not
mhm,
interested in that much, then I'm not going to be successful in it, because I'm not like 100% committed. And
yeah,
so I also feel like there's a lot of things that have already been done. Um, and it's kind of like trying to reinvent yourself in that space of like doing really cool stuff, but also knowing that a lot of people do it and it's not that big of a deal,
mhm.
but also trying to find something meaningful through that. I'm not sure, like I've gone a
No,
little bit all over the place. I'm not sure how to answer that question, because I just haven't really been on to something yet. Yeah.
I know exactly what you're talking about because after my 100 miler last year in August, I I kind of went through this weird period of I don't know what I'm gonna do
Yeah.
now because that was so intense that usually like every year I'm like stacking an adventure. Like it's usually more than the last year's.
Yeah.
I'm a big proponent of progressively overloading myself like that.
Yeah.
After that 100 though, I was sitting there and like, how do I top this? Like that
Hmm.
was tough, right? And so I wonder if you're kind of in that too, where you're like in that expedition was so intense, right? And you're just
Yeah.
like, wow, that was something else. And now you're kind of but that's a great point too, is you're looking for something that has meaning too, because if you do
Yes.
something that you don't want to actually, you're not that bought into when you are sitting in that tent for 40 hours, a lot
That's
more
when that's
you
when
tap
you
out,
start
right?
to
Yeah.
think like, what
Hmm.
am I doing here? And that's
Exactly.
when the mental state just kind of breaks down, and that's when you can be in trouble.
It
Yeah.
happened to me. We did the Wind River High Route. It's called in Wyoming this last year. It's basically 100 miles off route. It's off trail. There's no trail. Well, there is a trail for some of it, but most of it's like off route, and you're just kind of scrambling over rocks and things. It's like a general route, and I just was not into it.
No.
And for whatever reason, I don't know why. I think I was kind of burnt out of like long distance hiking last year and things. And we ended up quitting on like day 2. It was first of all, it was very hard. It was very difficult. Like it took 4 hours to go a mile and a half at certain points because it was hard travel. And so, yeah, I just kind of pulled the plug, and I realized like I was not bought into it that year. And so it's a really good point for people that are listening to, make sure, just like Valerie's saying, like make sure it has meaning to you. Make sure you're bought into it, because otherwise in those dark moments, you're going to go sideways.
Yeah, absolutely. And it doesn't mean that I know that I'm going to do something maybe here, maybe in the fall. I'm not sure. And I, like I said, I'm going to keep doing these like smaller adventures and just smaller little objectives to keep my fitness up and just enjoy being outdoors all the time. So I'm going to keep doing that. But as far as like a big expedition planned, I don't have any for myself. I do guide some expeditions with Ray. And he has his adventure travel company. And so we are planning on going back to the Arctic, but in September this time, and bringing clients up with us. So a little bit different environment, but that's still something that I'm really looking forward to. And that's going to be challenging as well. Going through a section of Baffin Island again, same spot, not the exact same route that we just did, but very similar and in the same general spot. So yeah, kind of going from the same community to the other one, but in a different valley. So that's like a big expedition that I'm looking forward to. It's just not like a personal one.
Right. Yeah. Now your day job is an air traffic controller.
Yes.
That's
completely unrelated.
Yeah, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool. Okay, so how do you balance that with your passion for adventure? How do you manage the time to find both and stay fit and do all that kind of stuff?
Balance is not a word that I use very often in my life. I guess, and I've struggled with that for many years. It's kind of like all or nothing, in the sense that I will train like crazy and work like crazy, and then like I'll burn out and be like, for a whole month I'll be just sitting on my couch not doing anything, and then I'll get the motivation back up and start doing stuff again and building my fitness back up again, and then I'll crash back down again. And so I'm not one of those persons that has to move every single day, or I get like super antsy or whatever. I'm just like, I have to work every day to get myself out the door and go for a run. But with keeping a really busy schedule, I find that works best for me, because I don't have the time to procrastinate. I don't have the time to put off my run to later in the evening or whatever. So whatever time frame that I have during that day, that's when I have to get up and get out. So that works best for me.
Yeah, it almost forces you you have to do it in this time period. You can't really select when you want to do it, because then that's good for procrastination. But if you have to get it done, it's funny because like before our podcast, typically I'll work out in the afternoon, but I was like, no, I want to get a workout in actually before the podcast. And so I felt the time crunch of the podcast and the time crunch of trying to get my workout in. But what do you know? If you give yourself there's some kind of principle of when you give yourself so much time, like you will complete something usually in that amount of time, right? Exactly. No matter how long it usually takes. Like if hour and 15-minute workout usually takes an hour and 15-minute workout, I usually can get it down to an hour if I need to, right? It's kind of funny how that works.
And like I'm also, with the job that I have, we work different shifts. So every day is different. And that helps me to stay motivated, because I don't really like routine. And so with every day being different, sometimes I'm working in the morning, sometimes in the evening, I work night shifts. And so it's kind of like all over the place. And so it really forces me to look at my schedule and be like, okay, well, tomorrow I have to wake up at 4:30 p.m. if I want to get my run in. So let's do it. And like, I'm not saying that I'm super disciplined and that I do it every day and like I never skip a workout. Like I'm definitely a slacker sometimes. But yeah, I think it just helps me stay a little bit more focused on what I have to do to have a busy schedule.
Yeah. So almost the non-routine of the schedule is a positive for you, because
Yes.
some people would maybe say that, consider that, well, if they, I guess if they're good at making excuses, they'll be like, oh, well, I don't have a set schedule to do it, so that's why I don't do it. But for you, you're saying, hey, this actually kind of helps me because I have to prioritize it at certain times. It makes me like
Yeah.
actively have to plan it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it also gives me a flexibility.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes like, I mean, if I can't join a group, like workout group, right? Because if they work out every morning, like Saturday morning at 9 a.m., that's when the group run is. Like I might be there once throughout the summer that I'm
Yeah.
not working a Saturday morning, you
Yeah.
know? So
Yeah.
that like I can't really sign up for those types of group settings, but I'm okay with that. Like I'm okay being alone and going for my workouts alone, but it gives me also the flexibility to say, okay, well, on that Saturday morning, yes, I can go and work out with you. And then like on Sunday evening, yes, I can go. And on a Wednesday morning, sure, why not? You know?
Yeah.
So yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah,
Awesome. Well, I super stoked that you've made it work for yourself,
yeah,
and obviously it's working. I mean, you just completed a sweet expedition in the Arctic, right? Like you're obviously
yeah.
up there, right?
But I also like, you know, I prioritize those adventures too in my schedule,
Hmm.
where my vacation time is like pretty much all dedicated to doing these adventures.
Yeah.
I only have, you know, I think it's 5 weeks of vacation time.
Mhm.
And so those 5 weeks I make them count, you know, and I go either guide adventures with Capping One company, or I do my own things, and then I keep one vacation week in there for like
Hmm.
to go with my partner and like or
Hmm.
with my family and do that kind of thing. So yeah, it's definitely challenging to try to like connect all of those things together, but that's what makes it interesting.
But I love what you said about prioritizing it. I always talk about prioritizing adventure. I mean, I
Yeah.
think some people, where they get to a point where summer goes by without them even thinking about it, and they have all this vacation time still, or they spent it going to this wedding and that wedding and another wedding, and next thing they know, like they had zero adventures, right?
Yeah.
And so how is it that you prioritize, do you like sit down and like think about, well, first of all, are you able to, you probably able to select like your days off, right?
So we work like on a schedule like shift. So I
Hmm.
have like random days off, but it's kind of like 5 on, three off, and then
Nice.
6 on, 4 off, and something like that.
Yeah.
So it varies a lot. And then for selecting like vacation time, it goes by um, what's the word? Can't remember. But like the oldest that's in the
Yes.
company.
Oh, what it,
How do you say that?
yeah, I see what you're saying. Like basically whoever's been there the longest gets the first pick type of thing.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. And so
yeah,
I'm the youngest to like in the company,
yeah,
so I get the last pick for vacation.
yeah, yeah.
But it also works for me because I'm rarely asking for vacation time in July. You know, I'll be asking for like, yes, give me those 2 weeks in February because I'm going to the Arctic, you know, whereas no one
Interesting.
wants those vacation days.
Yeah.
So it works for me too in that way.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I love it. I love it. Yes. So you obviously you know how to prioritize adventure, and I mean that's why you're doing things like this, expeditions, guiding people, ultra
Yeah.
marathons, and things like that.
Yeah.
What did like what advice would you give to young women that are interested in pursuing things like you do in the outdoors? And kind of on top of that, like how can they overcome some of the obstacles they might face in this industry, like the outdoor industry? So advice, and then how can they overcome some obstacles that might be prevalent?
Um, I'm sure that it's very different for every person, and I think it's different where everyone is from and where they live. I'm kind of lucky here. We have a really good environment where like women are encouraged to get outside and go on trails, and it's not super sketchy. Like I never felt like I was scared to go running on trails alone at night. But that's just because of the place that I live in, and I think that a lot of people are not that lucky. But I'd suggest just getting other friends. They could be male or female, doesn't matter, but just getting a group of people into going out and trail running or going hiking as a group. But also kind of building that confidence through that group. And then once you have enough confidence, just like go and do stuff by yourself as well to build that confidence even more. And the only way to build confidence is to get out there and do stuff. That's the only way. You can read about it. You can watch videos. You can join classes. But the only way to really build confidence is through experience and going out there and doing stuff. And then the other thing too is to kind of, surround yourself with people that have more experience than you do. And learn from them, and not be afraid of asking for help, asking for advice, and asking for tips and tricks, and then taking that info, take some, leave some. Not everything applies to you, and then going out and putting it into action and testing it out for yourself.
I love it. I love it. I didn't, yeah, I didn't think about the group thing too. Like that's a great tip.
Yeah, and
Especially,
also it keeps you accountable in some way of like if you call up your friend and say, well, tomorrow morning, 9 a.m., we're going for a run. Well, like tomorrow morning, 9 a.m., you got to show up, you know?
yeah,
You can't say, oh, well, maybe I didn't sleep well and blah, blah, you know, and get some friends that will hold you accountable for that too, you know? If that's like one of your issues is that you procrastinate a lot and you put things back and you're saying, well, maybe I'll go tomorrow or whatever. Well, that's a really good way of getting over that hurdle, is just like call up a friend and say, even if that friend doesn't want to come, right? That you can call up your good friend and say, well, tomorrow morning, 9 a.m., I'm going for my run. And then like you have to text me or call me and say, did you go for your run? No, why not? You know,
yeah, right.
get out there. Let's go.
Have an accountability partner.
Yeah.
I
And
love
it could be a coach if you want to go through the coaching route, and that could be a really good good tool there. But you can have it just with your friend, your mom, your dad, whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. So get other people involved.
Yes.
Basically, is like a good principle with that. Whether it's a mentor, a group, accountability partner, something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it also helps to like share those good moments, bad moments, and that whole progression with people too. It makes it more enjoyable, more fun.
True.
Yeah.
That's true. And you can look back on it too when you meet up with them again, sometime, in the future or something like that. You can look back on the past. Remember when we spent 40 hours in a tent?
Yeah, exactly. And that's why like I do some solo adventures as well, but I think I prefer being with a group, even though like sometimes we're not talking when we're skiing out there. Like we can't hear anything because we've got all of our hoods on top of our heads and like there's wind and all that, and we're like screaming at each other to hear, but it's still like you're out there with people and you're connecting in that way. And I think as human beings, we enjoy being connected to others, and we kind of need it. So yeah, I think it's important.
I agree. Awesome. Well, Valerie, thank you so much for coming on. And this was an incredible episode. I think people are really going to enjoy just number one, being inspired by you have a really infectious attitude, you know, with your adventures and stuff like that. And I think they're going to be super inspired to go out and do some of these challenging things that maybe was kind of on their mind maybe before listening to this episode. Now, hopefully maybe we got them past that little line that they had to cross, and now they're going to go through and they're going to end up planning it this summer or something like that. So I appreciate you. How can people catch up with you and your adventures?
Well, I'm on TikTok, and the handle is the Running Panda, or on Instagram as well. And it's the Running Panda as well.
The Running Panda. So nobody should forget that, right?
No, the Running Panda. Panda is actually my dog's name. So
okay.
he's kind of like, he's part of all my daily adventures and daily trainings. So kind of, it was fitting to include him into that social media. Yeah, he's like
That's awesome.
the mascot.
Perfect. Nobody will forget that one. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I love it.